Imagine, for a moment, that the outcome of the Second World War rested entirely on the shoulders of a man who was already dead. He wasn't a decorated general, a fearless commando, or a brilliant strategist. In fact, in life, he was a man the world had largely forgotten, a drifter, lonely and destitute. Yet in the spring of 1943, this man became the most important soldier in the Allied arsenal. His mission was impossible. His destination was a beach in Spain, and his primary objective was to lie to Adolf Hitler. This is the story of Operation Mincemeat, perhaps the most bizarre, cold-blooded, and ultimately successful deception ever conceived in the history of warfare. It is a tale of a corpse that went to war and a secret that saved thousands of lives, all built on a foundation of absolute, calculated madness. By early 1943, the tide of the war was shifting, but the Allies were facing a geographic nightmare. They had successfully cleared the Axis powers out of North Africa, and the next logical step was Europe. To any amateur looking at a map, the target was screamingly obvious: the island of Sicily. It was the soft underbelly of the continent, the stepping stone into Italy, and the heart of occupied territory. The problem was that the Germans weren't amateurs. They knew Sicily was the target, and they were digging in with everything they had. Churchill famously remarked that everyone but a bloody fool would know it was Sicily. If the Allies invaded there, they would be walking straight into a meat grinder. They needed a miracle, or more accurately, they needed a way to make the most obvious target in the world look like a clever distraction. The plan was born in the smoke-filled rooms of British naval intelligence, specifically from the minds of two men, Charles Cholmondeley and Ewan Montague. They were part of the 20 Committee, a group dedicated to double-cross and deception. Their idea was so macabre, it sounded like a rejected plot from a spy novel. They wanted to take a dead body, provide it with a false identity, equip it with top-secret documents, and drop it into the sea where the tides would carry it toward the enemy. The goal was to convince the German High Command that the Allies were actually planning to invade Greece and Sardinia, and that the massive buildup around Sicily was the real trick. But to make a lie that big work, the details had to be perfect. The Germans were meticulous, and any slip-up would result in a catastrophe of unimaginable proportions. The first and most difficult challenge was the body itself. You couldn't just use anyone. The cause of death had to be believable as a victim of a plane crash at sea, yet the body had to be fresh enough to pass an autopsy. After a quiet and desperate search through London morgues, they found Glyndwr Michael. He was a 34-year-old Welshman who had died after consuming rat poison. A tragic, lonely end. Because the poison acted slowly, his death could plausibly mimic the effects of exposure and drowning. With the permission of the local coroner, provided the man's true identity was never revealed, the intelligence team took possession of the body. From that moment on, Glyndwr Michael ceased to exist. In his place was born Acting Major William Martin of the Royal Marines. Creating a person from scratch is an exercise in obsessive detail. Montague and Cholmondeley didn't just give Major Martin a uniform, they gave him a soul. They filled his pockets with the pocket litter of a real life. They gave him a fiancée named Pamela, complete with a photograph and 2 passionate love letters. They gave him a stern letter from his father, a receipt for a new shirt, and stubs from a London theater performance. They even gave him a small overdraft notice from his bank to show he was a bit careless with money. A humanizing flaw. They wore his boots around the office for weeks to make them look broken in. Every single item was designed to build a narrative of a real man with a real life who just happened to be carrying a very important briefcase. That briefcase was the heart of the deception. Inside were personal, unofficial letters between high-ranking generals. These weren't dry, formal reports. They were written as shop talk between friends. dropping casual hints that the main Allied thrust would be in Greece, while the cover operation was Sicily. This was the masterstroke. The British knew that if the documents looked too official, the Germans might smell a rat. But a personal letter from a general to a colleague? That was gold. With the documents sealed and the body packed in a specially designed cylinder filled with dry ice, the mission moved from the laboratory to the front lines. On the night of April 30th, 1943, the British submarine HMS Seraph surfaced off the coast of Huelva, Spain. The location was chosen with surgical precision. The tides there were predictable, and the area was known to be crawling with German intelligence agents. The commander of the Seraph and a few select officers brought the cylinder onto the deck. Only they knew the truth. They slipped the life jacket onto Major Martin, chained the briefcase to his trench coat, and whispered a brief prayer before pushing him into the dark, cold Atlantic. The submarine submerged and vanished, leaving the fate of the Mediterranean campaign floating in the surf. A Spanish sardine fisherman found the body the next morning. As the British had hoped, the Spanish authorities, while officially neutral, were deeply influenced by the Abwehr, the German military intelligence. Word of the English officer and his briefcase traveled fast. What followed was a tense, diplomatic dance. The British began sending frantic, top-secret cables, asking for the return of the briefcase, knowing the Germans would be intercepting every word. This manufactured panic only served to convince the Germans that they had stumbled upon something of immense value. Back in London, the 20 Committee waited in agonizing silence, watching for any sign that the bait had been taken. The documents eventually made their way to the desk of Alexis von Roena, a key intelligence analyst for the German army. Von Roena was known for his attention to detail, but he was completely taken in by the humanity of Major Martin's pocket litter. The letters were so convincing, and the personal details so vivid, that he passed the information up the chain of command with his full endorsement. Eventually, the fake plans reached the desk of Adolf Hitler himself. The deception was so effective that Hitler overruled his own generals. He became convinced that the Allies were going for the Balkans. He ordered the elite 1st Panzer Division to move from France all the way to Greece. He shifted torpedo boats and shifted defenses away from the very beaches where the Allies were actually going to land. When the Allied fleet finally appeared off the coast of Sicily in July 1943, the Germans were caught completely off guard. The soft underbelly was indeed soft because the teeth of the German defense were hundreds of miles away, guarding empty beaches in Greece. The invasion, which many feared would be a bloodbath, was a stunning success. Thousands of Allied soldiers lived to see another day because the German tanks they should have been fighting were fueled up and waiting for a ghost that never arrived. Operation Mincemeat hadn't just fooled a few spies. It had altered the defensive posture of an entire empire. The success of the mission was so absolute that even weeks after the invasion of Sicily began, Hitler remained convinced that it was merely a feint and that the real attack was still coming in Greece. He kept his best units out of the fight for far too long, allowing the Allies to secure a foothold in Europe that they would never relinquish. Back in England, Ewan Montagu sent a famous cryptic telegram to Winston Churchill. "Mincemeat swallowed whole." The man who never was had completed his mission. In the end, Major William Martin was buried with full military honors in the cemetery of Huelva. For decades, the headstone bore only that name, a monument to a fictional hero. It wasn't until the late 1990s that the British government finally added a small inscription to the base of the grave, revealing the true name of the man lying beneath the Spanish soil: Glyndwr Michael. He was a man who, in life, had no one and nothing, but in death, he became a savior. His story serves as a haunting reminder that in the shadow world of espionage, the most powerful weapon isn't a bomb or a bullet. It's a well-told lie wrapped in the tragic truth of a human life. Glyndwr Michael's journey from a London morgue to a hero's grave in Spain remains the greatest deception of the war, proving that sometimes the dead really can tell tales, especially when those tales are the ones the enemy is desperate to believe. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the shadows of World War II, make sure to hit that subscribe button for The Lost Dispatch. We travel through the forgotten files of history to bring you the stories that were never meant to be told. What historical mystery should we decode next? Let us know in the comments. Your intel